sort of really exciting moment in time where we actually have the most diverse Australian workforce that we've ever seen. We've got sort of 4 or 5 generations working alongside each other. About 30% of our workforce were originally born overseas, and that creates a lot of obviously cultural and linguistic diversity in our workplaces. We've got as close to gender parity as we've ever had in workplaces.
Right.
2.5% Aboriginal population are now in more formal traditional workplace settings, which is also the highest levels that we've seen.
So here we are today. I'm with Brianna from Allianz. Welcome to the PIEF Conference 2024 podcast year.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, your session today, and an excellent session it was unpacking the new diverse workforce. Now, talk to us about the new diverse workforce. What are we seeing? How has it evolved? What's it becoming?
Certainly. So we're at sort of a really exciting moment in time where we actually have the most diverse Australian workforce that we've ever seen. We've got sort of 4 or 5 generations working alongside each other. About 30% of our workforce were originally born overseas, and that creates a lot of obviously cultural and linguistic diversity in our workplaces. We've got as close to gender parity as we've ever had in workplaces.
Right.
2.5% Aboriginal population are now in more formal traditional workplace settings, which is also the highest levels that we've seen. We've got about 30% of workers identifying as some form of neurodiversity, about 10% of workers with a visible disability. So we're at this really amazing time where our workplaces have the greatest richness in people and experience and views that we've ever seen. But we're not necessarily doing the best job of catering to all of those diverse needs, particularly when it comes to the moments in time where people are experiencing challenges and maybe have some impact to their mental health. And by extension, we're also now seeing some of the most diverse claims that we've ever seen, with some of the greatest sort of complexity and needs that are sitting outside of what we've traditionally managed in the compensable services space.
So obviously this is a challenge for the personal injury
Yeah.
industry. But if we start with the employers, the workplaces, what challenges are they seeing?
The biggest one that I think we're seeing at the moment, and Allianz have been doing some research where we have been surveying the sort of Australian workforce and leaders to understand exactly what their sentiment and experience of work is. And for me, one of the most compelling things that came back from this year's research was that about 86% of leaders think that they are doing an exceptionally good job
Mm.
of being compassionate and empathetic towards the needs of their people. But that sentiment's really only translating across to about 46% of the workforce. So we're seeing this sort of empathy gap broaden at the moment. I don't believe that that is being driven by lack of care from leaders. I think there's probably 3 things going on. We're not necessarily equipping leaders with the really contemporary skills that they need to manage people, and I think people management has gotten more complex. We're not necessarily providing leaders the time that they require to manage people and to actually be in a position to identify those potential changes and needs and have really meaningful conversations and identify those appropriate referral pathways, because we don't want them to be therapists, but we do want them to be great supporters and advocates. And I think we're also seeing that as our workforce becomes more diverse, the conversation we're asking them to have are also becoming more diverse. And the quality of those conversations tends to deteriorate a little bit when people are less familiar or have less direct sort of ability to empathize with or similar experience as those issues that are being shared. And so I think we also are at a point where we really need to broaden kind of the remit for leaders and help them equip with some skills around things like cultural diversity and better understanding of, neurodivergence and things like that. But we also probably need to lean on some other functions like peer support, where people can connect with others that have more of that shared experience as well.
And what, because obviously this change will take some time. So what impact are you seeing now in the workplace with managers who are ill prepared to manage diversity?
I think we're seeing a couple of things. The first one is, unfortunately, in environments where people don't feel well supported and where their needs are not being met, or they don't feel that they can turn up and be their real self in the workplace, kind of show that whole person. We are then seeing that leverage into distress for those workers. We're seeing that leverage into interpersonal issues, potentially issues around discrimination, bullying, harassment. That then has the potential to manifest into claims, which we have to deal with. But it's also causing a bit of an erosion in some workplaces of their culture. We're also seeing huge rates of turnover in that same sort of research I spoke to earlier. We heard that extrapolated out, about 2.7 million Australian workers are considering changing role in the next 12 months. And one of the leading causes of that is around feeling like the workplace is supportive to their needs and is sort of recognizing and celebrating them for themselves. So I think workplaces are going to feel it in a few ways: productivity, absenteeism, and mental health claims on that sort of more individual basis. But you'll also note it in culture and in some of those retention challenges. And that will then have broader implications for those workplaces too.
And how equipped are case managers are you smiling? How equipped, I think I know the answer. How equipped do you think case managers are in managing and communicating and understanding diversity in workplaces?
Yeah, I think they do a phenomenal job of managing injuries and supporting return to work. But what I have seen over the last few years is that the complexity of those cases have
Mm,
increased, and we're probably not doing the best job in giving them the knowledge and the referral pathways and the tools to apply those really foundational, phenomenal skills that they have to these more diverse and challenging instances where people's needs are greater and where people's sort of support requirements are going to sit a little bit outside of what they're traditionally used to
mm,
sort of supporting people with. So I would say the transferable skills are absolutely there, but that we need to do a bit more work as an industry of really helping to provide some of that training around things like cultural diversity, around First Nations people and how their experience of healthcare sectors and insurance and recovery differs from what they might have previously experienced. We need to do more education about how to, really respectfully engage with LGBTIQ plus populations and how some of our just administrative processes aren't actually inclusive to them and how we can improve those sorts of things. So there's a bit of work to be done, definitely at the case management level, but I think also very much at that industry level as well.
So you've got the research and sharing it with us. Where does the program go next?
So I think there's two really important ways for our program to continue to have influence. The first is to use those research findings to help equip workplaces with some evidence-based directive and advice around what good looks like, practical strategies that they can implement and expect to see meaningful outcomes through their workplace, and really kind of leaning into that psychosocial safety space, but bringing that diversity lens in
Mm,
because we can't just rely on compliance. We also need to cater to people. The other piece for us is then also using this understanding of kind of the more diverse groups who are increasingly being represented in our claims to look at better claims management processes, but also maybe some advocacy around ways that we can improve and modernize the scheme for all of the people that are trying to engage with it. And, particularly we've been taking a lot at PIEF around modernization and technology, but making sure that we're bringing all of the voices and all the people along in that journey as well, because we can't assume that everyone can engage with those sorts of really big picture ideas we have around where we'd like to see the scheme head in that regard. So I think, making sure we're continuing to give a voice, trying to create more spaces for lived experience is probably the other area where we can hopefully have some influence and the research can start a much bigger project in that space.
and embracing diversity can be challenging, can't it?
Yeah.
But isn't it kind of cool?
Oh, I think it's amazing. And I
Yeah.
think, you know, the data tells us, to be really boring as a starting point, that
Mm,
the more diverse a workplace is, or the more diverse your stakeholder groups are, the better outcomes you get. More innovation, the more
mm,
diversity of ideas, the more creativity, the better you cater and service kind of clientele. But I also, when I think about the workplaces I've most enjoyed working in, or even the friendship groups where I come away from feeling the most enriched, it's the ones that are more diverse and where people have a lot of different experiences that they bring and where I learn new things and where people can respectfully challenge others. And I certainly want those workplaces into the future. So yeah, I think it's really exciting because if we get this right, it benefits every single
everybody.
one of us. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So congratulations on the research. Thank you for your time in the studio.
Thank you so much for having us. It's been a pleasure.
Our pleasure indeed.